Fact is, what you will hear from here on for the next 20 odd minutes will be absolutely unfiltered, absolutely impromptu, and that's why I don't want to call it a fireside session. I would rather call it unplugged debate. And the more contrarian views we have, the better it becomes. For the uninitiated, between these two gentlemen, they have managed over the last almost 2 decades a series of GCCs which actually have not only been marquee logos and the brands, they in India, as a part of global capability centers, have actually become a template for the others to emulate, others to kind of follow, and others to replicate. More importantly, I have a privilege of knowing both of them for quite some time. And one of the things which has really stood out today, what Aveek is doing and Dr. Anilesh is doing, is how they have also morphed themselves through the various work and the spheres of assignments they are doing in terms of what I call the relevancy of times, how the GCC has also evolved. And this is where, when we do this kind of a debate or a conversation, what you will see coming out from both of them will be absolutely pearls of wisdom and nuggets of experience which not has been experienced per se from a GCC side consolidated. Because the talks what you had primarily were more about, look, this is how it can happen, this is what could be the possible. And I nudged both these gentlemen to really talk about, look, beyond this frenzy, euphoria, what's not working for GCCs? There is always that simmering of fault line which one can notice and say, look, if we fix this, it can go to the next level. And I want to ask both of you, what could be that imminent fault line for a GCC where things can go wrong in terms of the acceleration what we are seeing today?
Okay, I'll go first. First of all, thank you so much for that introduction. Very kind of you. I'm going to give you a very small narrative,
Sure.
small story. And this small story goes back to the late 1990s when we had a very interesting company called General Electric. Right? And they went ahead and they set up a GCC. That I think it was around 1997, I may get the date wrong. Fast forward to 2005, this is when these guys decided to convert that GCC into a P&L. They were a captive for General Electric. They became a P&L and started selling the services to other companies as well. The strengths on which this was founded was Six Sigma and lean processes, which was the heart of General Electric. Go forward 2 years, 2007. They had an IPO. Today, I was just looking at the numbers. I think they have a market capitalization of roughly around $9 billion with about probably a little less than $5 billion of revenue, if I got the numbers absolutely correct. Now, why am I giving you this story? You asked about fault lines, and this is one fault line that GE covered very well. What they did over a period of time, in addition to adding value, was they locked themselves in with those Six Sigma and lean processes. And in 2017, they actually had an AI-driven digital approach to their customers, which caused them to get locked in. I'm going to use a term here, embeddedness. The fault line is, if you do not create embeddedness, your GCC is at risk.
If you don't create embeddedness, the GCC is at risk. Aveek?
Yeah, I mean, important. I would kind of take it a bit further, Anilesh, and say that it's not about embeddedness. I think it's slightly more than that. I mean, you're right. I mean, you've got to be part of the global enterprise. But I think it should be seamless. It should not be something separate. I think this calling yourself a GCC, sitting out there, sometimes causes a pain. I've spent a long time in 2 GCCs in my life. And you know, when you spend a long time, you kind of tend to create relationships at the home country. And when you talk to some of the people, especially not the senior folks, they always toe the politically correct lines, but when you talk to the middle level folks who kind of tell you what they really think about the GCC, that's what is to be heard. And they kind of, if you're not careful, think of it as a separate entity. I think you need to get away from that. And somehow, I don't know how to do it. I mean, there are ways to do it probably. Sometimes been successful, sometimes not. But I think each of you would probably, or the leaders will have to probably do that. Because it's as much an enterprise, part of the enterprise than anything else. Many of them have done it. Many of the places where the leadership sits here. Right? Not everybody is there, by the way. But when your leadership sits here, it has a team over there, it kind of starts getting to be more part of the enterprise. But you're right. I mean, it has to be that whole thing about a GCC being something sitting in India or Philippines has gone away mostly, but needs to completely dissolve.
So you touched upon Aveek GCC leadership, and that's exactly in the first part of the day-to-day. We talked about that at length. But the fact over there is today is everyone in the room realize what used to work in the past in terms of how GCC leaders need to kind of see the growth and the journey of GCC may not seemingly in a larger mode can happen how if they take it the same path today. The thing what I'm trying to say is if just being a site leader, country head and MD as a title carries a responsibility to be aligned with the organization, is that enough to sustain and be more resilient with your GCC, or there's something which needs to be built today and say, look, I'm the one who's building the future of this GCC. And this is what, if it happens, it takes the GCC to the next level.
Yeah, I think this is the single, from my point of view, the single largest risk that faces the entire industry is actually that leadership part of it. It's not just, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, the pace of change for the GCC leader was much slower than it is today. The environment is changing much more rapidly. I mean, the way that technology is coming in, different concepts are coming in, it's much faster today than it used to be 10, 20 years back. So 10, 20 years back, we got time to adjust, we got time to learn, we got time to kind of fit in, find out ways of dealing with it. Today, the person who kind of takes a role like that has to run at 3, 4, 5 times the speed that we had to. So that's, I kind of sympathize with that, but you still have to do it. Plus, the demand-supply gap is huge. How many GCCs were there at that point of time?
Correct.
Right? How many of them are there today? And I know KSB, is he still there? Because every time he says that another 300 or 500 is coming tomorrow. So, but they're probably coming. May not be tomorrow, but over the next few years, you'll be getting.
But the story, Aveek, is it's not about scale. It's not about the quantum. It's not about the numbers. Because I think few examples not going right, everyone knows, can spell a lot of, I would say, trouble for many of the GCCs. And we have seen that in the past as well. So if scale is not, and I'm just trying to build one layer further to this, and Anilesh, you can chime in as well. If scale is not what takes you to the next level now, what is that which is required for a GCC to be at the next level?
Yeah. Anilesh, just before, I mean, I think, as I said, what's the value of this entity in the parent is probably the biggest question to you, right? I mean, yes, scale gave you cost savings, so that's why that was the reason. But if you go past that, what's the other reason that you are important enough for the company? What are those key goals of the enterprise that you are actually supporting from here? Those are the kind of questions that need to be asked.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Aveek, on that. But I want to give some added dimensions out here, which is a leader today, and I think that's been the realization and the learning that has taken place over the past 20 odd years. A leader today has to make sure that the leader understands that the reason for existence of the GCC is the parent company, and it's not the GCC itself.
True.
I have been part of one GCC, which we had to shut down and sell. I've been through that experience. Right? And the reason for that was primarily two, and I'll recount them. One was the Lehman crisis hit. This was, I think it was in 2008 or thereabouts.
2008,
Yeah.
right.
The Lehman crisis hit and the company was struggling, and they decided to do other things, and therefore the GCC had to be sold. The second reason was that the person who was sponsoring the GCC developed, unfortunately, brain cancer and passed away. So there was no owner for the GCC as such. There was nobody saying this is a corporate strategy. That was a very departmental strategy that had come out. Now, taking that learning and bringing it today, it is, and that's why I started off on the whole embeddedness part of it, which is to say it has to be driven by a corporate strategy. A GCC leader today is looking at leadership from ensuring that embeddedness based upon corporate goals, as you were talking about. That is something that's absolutely crucial in today's context. A leader today,
And I want to chime in.
One more point I'll mention.
Sure.
A leader today has to be, and it's one of my favorite terms, which is why I'm going to use it.
Sure.
Has to be ambidextrous.
Ah,
Has to be looking at the future, the value that has to be created, as well as running business today as business as usual.
nice. You guys have given me liberty to ask direct questions. In the days where you were managing GCCs, and a very straightforward question, how exactly were you evaluated by your bosses? Today they call it stakeholders. You used to say bosses. How exactly were you evaluated by your bosses?
Okay, I'm going to jump in here, right?
Please.
Which is, candidly, there was nothing established.
Aveek is giving a wry smile.
There was nothing established. You know, there's a roadmap, you have to hire FTEs, you have to start delivering, all those things are there. But when you look at, were there actual metrics around what kind of value is the GCC delivering, and were we being judged on that? The answer is no, at least not for me. I don't know if your experience was different.
Mixed, I would say. For the first 4 or 5 years, 6 years, probably the kind of the illegitimate child, so to say, recognized behind closed doors but not spoken of outside. That was our situation.
Good you didn't say surrogate.
Right. So, but you know, over time, I think more than my boss used to have a 30-second yearly appraisal. So no use talking about how I was evaluated.
30 second.
30 seconds, yeah.
Wow.
But I think what was coming from the stakeholders is important. So if I would get into, say, for example, the CFO would always include me in his leadership meeting. So if we came to a leadership meeting, he would be calling me in, and the discussion was very simple. And he came from a cost angle, and he saw India in a different light, right? So he would say that, you know, it's budgeting time. Every one of you was probably come back with a 5% increase in your future budgets, but there's one person in this room, he's going to do it with 5% less. And you guys need to talk to that gentleman. And he would point to me. So to him, the GCC was an epitome of how to do more with less, or how to do the same with even less, right? So efficiency, effectiveness, those were the things, that's the lens that they saw us as. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a great place to be. If for example, there were some unexpected pulls. For example, the GCC for Wells Fargo in India produced more IP than any other line of business of the bank, right? So you kind of saw it with a different level of kind of respect, right? I think that part is important because then, you know, you become more peers. Thirdly, there would be very strategic pieces of the bank that we would get drawn into. We didn't ever put up our hands. I mean, we didn't have to force our way, thump the table and all that stuff. No, very graciously. For example, the bank was doing application rationalization. We had 5,200 some number of systems. And somebody in the board said, why do we have so many? So everybody started jumping. So the group CIO was one sponsor. And for some reason, my name was put in as the other co-sponsor. Now, I don't really understand much of technology, but my name was put in by the business to balance of technology. Now, the point is, nothing about me. I think it's more about the GCC. The GCC having that capability to balance things out, making sure it can do with less resources. That was the key identifier that it had, to have somebody from the GCC be part of a very, very high profile exercise in the company. It kind of tells you that, you had arrived. You had means the GCC had arrived, right?
If you take a new rendition today, and both of you are doing something which is, you are working as an independent consultant advising GCCs. Aveek, you have Gloplax, which is into the whole piece of setting it up, scaling it up. Now, the fact over there, and largely, if we call it, the often misconception is you set up infrastructure, you get a kind of a swanky office, you get all that compliance check, set up the GCC, hire a leader, and that person will do it everything for you. Is that true?
Absolutely not, right?
But does these kind of conversations happen when?
They do.
Okay.
You're kind of reminding me of, I'm going to get in a bass player and a drummer and a guitarist, right? And I'm going to put one song in front of them, and there'll be one guy who'll be the conductor, and magic will happen. It doesn't happen that way. Okay? It's very important for the leader to be playing a very crucial role out here. Now, if I were to look at the success formula, if I may put it that way, for a GCC today, it's going to be centered around a couple of things. The objectives, why, the future value, the sponsorship from the parent. You guys would have heard all of these conversations already since morning. But at the heart of the entire thing is the operating system. And I'm going to call it a unified operating model of how the GCC plugs into the overall objectives of the parent organization, and the leader plays such a crucial role in making that happen. The make or break can be the leader over here, and that's a very important thing.
So Aveek, let me pick up operating system. It's nuanced, it's differentiated, and it's unique for every GCC. And you are looking from a vantage point where you have multiple conversations with organizations who want to set up GCCs. Now, to bring that differentiation, DNA, and a very clear differentiated archetype, how do you go about doing that?
So we are doing, I'll tell you from our experience, we're doing all the things that we never did when we actually worked in the GCC. All right? I think, and again, just regressing a bit, I don't think most leaders, even me, if you put me in this situation, as just a leader, setting up a GCC, making it successful, would be very difficult today. You would need a lot of tools and jigs and fixtures to actually make you successful, and keep pace to what the speed that is in which it is developing today. The environment is changing today. I think that's going to be very important for all leaders, I would think. There can be some supermen and superwomen. But I would say that, the hyper-personalization is happening. So you got to customize whatever models you create, your strategy you create, the way you design your GCCs have to be absolutely personalized to the parent. Not just the parent's outcomes, the culture of the parent, the psyche, how they think, their business, the industry in the business is playing, the uncertainty or certainty that the business has. It has way too many parameters today than we used to face 10, 15, 20 years ago. It was a simpler life at that point of time. And there has to be, and somebody spoke about AI here before this. I think it's a good opportunity to apply AI. You have a great opportunity to bring it in. If you can create a model, which kind of we are making an attempt to, that can design this thing, understand the design elements, and link them to the outcomes that you want to derive out of it, you have a very good opportunity to apply AI and help the leader really succeed.
Now, Anilesh, let me pick up where Aveek left. AI and GCC, how these two can be intertwined.
I think, and I've missed most of the Gyan sessions all morning, so I really don't know what's been covered. So this might be a little bit of a duplication. I think there are two aspects of it when you're looking at AI. One is when you're looking at some regular operational aspects of it, there is an easy way of reducing operational load, enhancing automation, enhancing efficiency, operations, all of that part happens. So GCC and AI can go very well together as far as that piece is concerned. When you're looking at hardcore product engineering, for example, I think the tools are yet to evolve where you can go ahead and say that let me get some automated software to be developed. Let me go ahead and automatically test it, and it gets automatically put into production. That particular part of it is still going to take a fair bit of time. But there's a lot of work that is already going on. Now keep in mind, I'm talking about this from a GCC perspective.
True.
Right? Now what we have to do is we have to take that Venn diagram and extend it all the way around the enterprise. Are there business problems out there that we can have talent out here solving for the organization? I think that's where the real value really lies. And it's starting to happen, and I think that pace is going to continue.
Since we've hit time, I just want to take a couple of rapid fire. I know Aveek doesn't like it, but so be it. Stage is there. If one thing which can make a break, and there are a lot of aspiring GCC leaders, I could see that today, met some of them. And one of the quintessential question came in that, look, if there's one make or break leadership attribute which can make a GCC leader go for that coveted position, what that attribute of leadership would be. One attribute.
Understand the business, parent business.
Understand the business, great.
He took mine, but anyway, I'll give you another one. Leading without authority.
Leading without authority. If this whole juggernaut of GCC will continue and the way it's going, what is one possible thing which can go wrong?
Donald Trump.
I'm not sure about that, but I think it's quite irreversible right now. But I think our ability to actually lead and make this successful.
Ability to actually lead, great. Now, last one, and this is where I think the rhetorically today, everyone is talking about GCCs. And the fact over there is that there are terms called GVC, GBE, GBS, GIC, I don't know how many kind of acronyms. If you have to pick up one term each, what that would be. And by the way, for the ones who are not aware, before GCC came in, and before that, there was something called share service and captive. The gentleman who championed the change to GIC was him actually. In one of the conference 10, 15 years back, 29 or 30 country heads came together and they vetoed the whole thing that take out captive as a word. It has a negative connotation because the only thing captive in our life is our spouses, so replace that with GIC. So Lalit, come back to this, Aveek. What is that one word? Anilesh, what is that one word?
What was the question?
What is do you want to retain GCC? Or there is a new, because everyone is giving names, acronyms, so I thought maybe you guys would love to give your sense of version as well.
I've done it once, I don't want to do it again, but look, I think it depends on the company. I think it's just their India center, if you would ask me.
India Center, wonderful.
I agree. Personally, I don't like the term GCC. I don't think it appropriately conveys the value that the whole strategy really provides. I've always been struggling with what could be an alternative. So in the absence of an alternative, GCC seems to be fine, but I agree with Aveek. I think we have to leave it to the individual organization. I know there's some companies that call it their innovation hub. There's some companies that call it the acceleration centers. There's some who call it their India center. And I think they need to be comfortable with that.
Awesome. Exactly. This is what happens when you go unprepared, unfiltered, unplugged. The conversation comes out, as I keep on saying, from what they have experienced, learned, and absolutely internalized over the years. Thank you so much, both of you gentlemen. Appreciate. Good conversation. Thank you so much.